Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week's theme and last week's theme of First and Last, checking out a song from a band's first and final album. Today and tomorrow, we'll be looking at Therion. Today, we'll be digging into something off of their debut album of Darkness. This track is called Morbid Reality. Let's see what Therion is bringing to the table today. This is hyper compressed. Oh, those 3/16 notes on the bass kick are slick. Very subtle tempo shift up. Our right guitar is just pure pedal tone. Our left guitar uses that pedal tone to start each riff, but goes into a lick. This sounds like it was recorded all in one take with the full bands. Okay. Yeah, a little bit of harmony. Really interesting decision on the guitar tone here. Really interesting on the underlying. Huh. How old was this? Um, that was fun. 91. Yeah. So, I had a really tough time capturing the structure of this. It seemed like we had a lot of linear ideas, like four linear ideas back to back, and then we repeated those four linear ideas, and then we went into our bridge, which had a semi-unique section to it that gave way for our outro guitar solo. So, depending on how the band breaks up their sections, this could end up being verse, chorus, outro, where the bridge is the outro, which is something I've talked about coming up often in modern pop that we've looked at, is ditching the ABABCB pattern for ABAB outro, where our outro is a brand new section. It's basically our C, it's our bridge, but it also takes us out of the song. We never return back to a final verse chorus or a final chorus by itself. I've been talking about, this is the new structure. This is what so many bands are going after these days. A pattern that I'm picking up. And nope, this band did it back in 91. Oh man, everything that was old is new again. Wow. That's just kind of fun. Um, so I asked how old this was. This is 91. There's two things that I wanted to bring up with that. First of all is the age of these folks here, which I am not privy to. Now without doing some heavy research, um, and I'm not going to do that live on camera, wasting everyone's time. I'm going to say they were probably a bit younger, though. It leans into the second thing I was going to bring up given the time. I had mentioned I thought that this whole thing was recorded one shot with the full band, which is something, it is a process that would have probably still been happening in the early 90s. I think. I don't know. You guys were more informed about recording processes through the decades. We'll have to let me know about that one. But there's a lot of elements in here where there's some roughness to some playing. Maybe somebody drags or rushes a little bit, which is given, or which is going to happen with all of the tempo changes throughout this track. Um, and not even just tempo changes, but uh, rhythmic changes too. There's one section where kind of that bum ba dum ba 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 bum ba 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 bum bum and you get this really fast rise up, and sometimes I heard the guitarist lean into that and just really like speed through it. right? This part's faster, so I got to play it faster, and kind of they rush through it a bit. But other members will drag behind a little bit on those for the first few notes and be like, oh, I got to, obviously I must be dragging if they're playing at that speed, and they'll line back up. And there's this tug of there's this push and pull that happens whenever somebody rushes or drags that makes it feel like they're all playing together rather than one by one with a click track or something. So that's what informed me of that. I could be wrong on that read, but I do think that this was a one-shot take in a room, no edits, where everybody recorded simultaneously. Doesn't necessarily need to be onto tape. This practice certainly started recording onto tape. I don't know how they were recording things in '91, but I do think that the band performed together with a single take, minimal if zero edits on that take, and their playing, their 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 temporal playing was based off of other people in the band's performance, and it gave the song a bit of a looseness, which I'm sure some people are really going to enjoy. It feels like a track from a pre-digital era before things like this could get polished out. And it gives the song a personality, for better or worse. I'm usually a pretty big fan of, the human experience in music, right? Having blemishes and imperfections. But for here, it happened just a hair too often in ways that were distracting for it to be a sort of human charm added to the track, and it kind of went onto the side of just kind of being sloppy. Uh, my first thought was these guys need to spend a little bit more time practicing, and maybe they didn't have that affordance. As usual, when I bring this stuff up, especially this week as we've been checking out first albums, time and money both come into play with stuff like this. Maybe they didn't have the time to practice before getting into it. Maybe they had to book the recording studio months in advance, and you just don't back out of that, right? The song just wasn't coming together, but it was close enough. It's like at 96%, right? It has a few issues with time. Everything else it's pretty good. Um, you just roll with it, right? And so I'm not putting the blame on them in particular for the sloppiness that's on display in several of the sections here, but I will say that it is a rough track. And I wish they would have had the ability to put a little bit more time into smoothing it down a bit. Just getting a little bit more practice time on it. But like I said, I might be the only person with that opinion, right? There's a lot of people who really enjoy the imperfections of the pre-digital rock and metal eras. And they would just absolutely, love this. Bryan, you're out of your mind. It's so much better like this. And like I said, I like flubs and little human imperfections put into music, but not at this level, not at this frequency, not in this distracting manner. This is just a little bit too much imperfection to me. But with that said, let's get on to some of the more positive elements of this. First of all, I do want to talk about that structure a bit. It is neat to hear a song kind of do this, where it really does kind of feel like an A B C D kind of thing. And then E, I guess, our bridge and solo. The bridge just kind of takes one of the other sections. C section, I think it was. The real groovy one that shifts between pedal tones and licks. Um, and we get a little bit of variation on that and then the solo on top of it. So it is not even really its own section, it's a variation of another one we had. But it's not A B A B C A B, which is super popular for metal of the time. You know, when you think of some of your favorite Metallica tracks, verse, chorus, bridge and solo, a third verse, and a final chorus, right? This is like metal of the time. Very stereotypical to have that structure. And this kind of bucks that and says, no, we're gonna go we're gonna have four different ones back to back, four different riffs. I still don't know if there's sections in their minds, but it is four riffs to me. We're gonna repeat that. And then we're just gonna finish the song out with a solo. um and I just love that sort of tossing the trends out the window idea. I honestly thought we were gonna have a fully linear track until we until I found the first landmark, which I think was the B section. I was like, oh no, this is familiar. And then we hit C, then we hit D. I was like, okay, we probably hit the A again. So that was really neat. I enjoy that aspect of it. Now all of these sections are comprised of very similar roles and ideas. We usually have a guitar riff that is shared between both guitarists, and we have a drum pattern that matches what the guitars are doing while simultaneously keeping a metronomic element in one of the limbs. This works for this style of music. It's not my favorite kind of metal because it runs a bit flat for me because there's just two things going on. The bass is basically non-existent in the mix. I couldn't hear it save for a couple of times, and at those points I was wondering if I was even really hearing the bass because I didn't hear it anywhere else. It could be they didn't have a bassist, which would probably not have been that big of a deal back then. Um, the only time that our guitarist deviated was during, I think, the chorus. And this was the part where I mentioned that our right guitarist was pure pedal tone, and our left guitarist was pedal tone 50% of the time, and a lick to finish off their phrase the other 50% of the time. And that pedal tone was, as is implied by the name of it, the same note for both of them. So it's like you're doing this, and then we deviate, and then we return, and then we deviate. And it's just like this nice little pattern going on here, right? So even at that section where they're like, okay, we're going to split our guitars, we're going to do two, they're going to do two different things. 50% of the time they're still doing the same thing. So it's just a very, like I said, kind of a flat song to me. There's just not a lot of musical depth to it. Um, the vocals sit on top of all of this and kind of do what the drums do, and they kind of do their best to balance their own thing and fitting rhythmically in with what the guitar riff is. Um, which is interesting at times. There's one moment, like I said, where we bounce between a series of eighth notes and then like a 16th note run, and then eighth notes and 16th note run, and the vocals kind of parallel that as well, and it's kind of awkward. I don't think the rhythm fits well with the vocals. It's a neat idea. And we can certainly see this very concept on full display with modern production and technique with bands like Archspire, who basically at times pair rapping with growling to get these really staccato rhythmic ideas that can pair well with what the rest of the band is doing on a rhythmic level. The technology was not here for that on the recording side, and I don't know how far we were with vocal techniques. As far as my mind goes, growling in the 90s, or this harsh vocals that we have, were not necessarily something that were studied and taught the way that they are now. Um, and even if they were, this vocalist seems to have chosen more of a wider sound, which is not going to work too well when you need these short staccato hits on those 16th notes. It just wasn't a great pairing. I'm just going to chalk that up to inexperience, but it could also have been a product of their time. Maybe nobody was pairing the process of rapping with harsh vocals yet to have given anybody that idea, right? Somebody has to innovate it. They have to come up with that idea. Um, but usually someone's going to do it poorly, and this kind of is that point. This could have been the point where someone's, oh, I want to keep doing those faster vocals like Therion does, but it's a bit muddy. I want it to be more precise, and maybe somebody decided to kind of what is it? Iterate on what Therion was doing here. I don't know. This might have been that inception point. But the vocals style just wasn't there for some of the rhythmic things they were trying to do. And when you pair that with some of the timing issues of the band, the fact that so many members, all of them almost at times, were trying to simulate the exact same rhythmic patterns as each other. I've said it many times before, especially when we look at technical bands, all it takes is to be, a 16th of a beat early or late on your release or your attack, and it begins to get muddy on this super quick technical stuff. Um, and that's what happens here. Everybody's just a hair bit early or late, and it just doesn't come off as something interesting to my ears. That muddiness, that timing inefficiency could be something you really enjoy. But for me, I really can hear something special going on here where the production kind of gets in the way of that, where this specific recording of it kind of gets in the way of it. There's a lot of things here that I do enjoy now that I'm thinking about it in tech death. But this specific performance and recording didn't capture the specific elements of these techniques that I enjoy in modern tech death. So yeah, actually, that kind of gives me a new fascination, a new appreciation for this. This kind of does feel like rudimentary things of concepts that I do enjoy. Yeah, okay. I'm coming around to it. Um, how did we get from structure to that? Geez, I took a weird tangent there. um, sorry. I think the last thing I really want to touch on then is our outro, our guitar solo. Interesting. We had a complete key change. We shifted to something adjacent to Phrygian dominant. It didn't feel as Phrygian as normal. So it might have been not dominant. It might have been a different subset of the Phrygian mode. But we definitely kind of shifted modes into that, had a very different flavor to it than the rest of the track did. But more importantly, what I think is a very interesting choice is our guitar tone has been rather clear this entire song. And they went for something a bit more vague for our solo. It almost feels like they should have been swapped. Our rhythm tone was used, I mean, granted, it had that, I don't know, there was a special effect on it that kind of gave it some character. That I would never use on a rhythm guitar tone, because the point of the rhythm guitar tones kind of fade into the background, right? But the volume, the clarity, the razor sharpness that allows it to cut through, that tone was used for the rhythm guitar that's supposed to be more in the background. And when they were given the spotlight, they kind of had a flatter tone that didn't cut through the sound as well. They felt reversed in roles, which is a very interesting choice. Otherwise, I really like that. I don't know what effect that was on it. It was a really nice way to differentiate that guitar tone from the one they had used the rest of the track. Um, and the guitar solo was fine. There wasn't anything in it that really stood out to me, but the band's first album. I'm really trying to give them the benefit of the doubt and kind of attribute a lot of this to inexperience, and possibly even just youthful uh, counterculture, right? That's something we've seen a lot this week, is that bands started out in their youth just kind of pushing the boundaries of not social, of standard convention, how songs are typically composed, how production is typically crafted, just kind of pushing against that, which teens are want to do, and seeing them refine their sound into something a bit more standardized as they age up and we check out some of their stuff from their later albums. So there's a lot of things that could go into the decisions on this specific song. Interestingly, I want to call this back to something. We checked out a band last week, I think. Oh, it was Catatonia, Without God. They did this thing with the vocals where they had echo and reverb on them. And so you kind of get this very wide, muddy sound to the vocals. And that was happening here too? Like, was this just a thing for the 90s? The 90s metal scene? A lot of bands were doing this heavy echo, but not disguising it under the band, like leaving the echo to bounce around above the music. I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of it with Catatonia. Not really a big fan of it here. But it is an interesting trend. I was not expecting to hear that again, given how awkward I thought it felt with Catatonia. But maybe this was something a lot of bands were doing. So yeah, we have a pretty straightforward metal track. Um, Quite a few riffs in it. Lots of tempo changes. Those tempo changes were kind of clumsily handled, but none of them made the song fall apart, so that's a win regardless. Um, and just kind of groovy in some sections and technical in others. Pretty solid track all in all, especially given what else was coming out at the time. This feels like a precursor to a lot of music coming out today. I can draw some parallels to it. Let's hit some lyrics, see what's going on there, and wrap this video up. So we have a it's interesting because there seems to be two layers here, and the first one is quite clear to me. It talks about being oppressed by rulers who you put in power and believe their lies, right? Um, it says oppression in your country takes you. Soon they'll be able to rule you too, but mesmerized you think it's a boon. You'll clammy dungeons await. You'll be killed by your own choice. The chorus says it's a morbid way of life. This gory alliance. It's about. It seems to me, specifically coming from a U.S. perspective, about voting against your own interests and then eating up the lies that the ruling class tell you is, they tell you things are going to be better for you, even though if you think about it, you're like, actually, that doesn't sound like it benefits me. But you just don't think about it, and you, as he says, killed by your own choice. Choosing to have, the worst parts brought down on you, choosing to be oppressed. But there's another side to this, because that's only about half the lyrics, that I don't quite get. I actually skipped a couple of lines, or one specific line. In the first verse, it says, "Oppression in your country takes you. Soon they'll be able to rule you too. Onslaught from the east will come soon. Mesmerized, you think it's a boon." Onslaught from the east. And I was thinking, okay, this was in 91. What was going on politically at the time? And I was like, I don't know. There's nothing at the time that I'd really think of that would be an Eastern threat. Uh, so I was like, oh, maybe it's about something in history. And well, that covers a lot. there's a there's a lot of things in history where rulers could be trying to put you down. Well, rulers were putting people down, and there were Eastern countries also getting ready to go to war with your country, like this double threat thing going on. Okay. Verse 3 says, asphyxiating lies have come true. Now they'll be coming after you. Malady will step into your mind. You'll become a hypochondriac. The lies part makes sense to me, but the idea of malady and hypochondria, not quite sure where they step into the picture. Unless this is also part of the delusional element, right? I don't know. That's pretty much all the lyrics, though, and that's my best read on that. It's about voting against your own interests and being happy to give your life for the things that you've voted into power. The rulers that are telling you they're gonna kill you and put you in a dungeon or whatever, and you're like, yeah, actually that sounds great. That's what I wanted out of this. Even though of course it's like terrible for your well-being. I don't know. It's a weird track. Lyrically. If you have any insight into that, let me know. Like I said, I think the first layer, voting against your own interests, um, being oppressed by your own country, but thinking that that's a positive. That's pretty straightforward. There's a few lines in here that don't seem to run parallel with that and are talking about something else entirely that I don't know. So if you got insight into that, let me know. Those are my thoughts on Therion's Morbid Reality. Let me know what you thought about the song as well. Put that stuff in the comments, right? If you enjoyed it, anything that stood out to you, anything you'd like to add on to what I said, correct me on. Above the comment section is a description box. In there, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here, has links to my music, it has links to the Discord server, has ways to support the channel, and so much more. Go ahead and check that out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Greatly appreciate all three. If you were interested in this and you're like, huh, I wonder what Therion's up to these days. Well, I don't know if I can answer that because I don't know if they're still around, but tomorrow, head back here, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC. We'll check out a song off of their latest album, whenever that happened to be. We also have a special selection today. If that interests you, we have one tomorrow as well after the Therion reaction tomorrow. So that's always stuff to look forward to. A great way to expand your musical horizons and discover new music. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.